A poor husband rushes into a luxurious mansion seeking work, only to be stunned to find a picture of his wife, proudly displayed in a gold frame in the hall, as the mistress of the house. And the housekeeper even refers to her by a completely different name. The mornings in Atlanta always started the same for me. Alarm at 5, shower, coffee black, lunch packed before anybody else in the house even turned over in bed. I liked it that way. If you grew up learning the world doesn't slow down for your feelings, you stop waiting for comfort. My daughter Kayla was 12 and carried her backpack like it weighed nothing. She slid into the passenger seat with her hair still damp, earbuds hanging loose around her neck. "You got practice today?" I asked. "Yeah, coach said we're running drills." "Again." She rolled her eyes. "Good. Keep your legs strong. That's how you don't get bullied on the court." She smirked at that. Kayla always did better when I kept it simple. No speeches, no long talks about life, just steady rules and steady love. When I dropped her off, she leaned across and kissed my cheek like she still hadn't decided she was too old for that. Then she hopped out and joined the crowd of kids moving toward the doors. I watched until she disappeared inside. I didn't leave until I knew she was safe. That was just how I was built. At work, the warehouse was loud and fast, but I understood it. Pallets, schedules, people calling in sick, trucks arriving late, drivers missing paperwork. Chaos had a rhythm if you listened long enough. I'd been an operations manager for 3 years. Before that, I wore a uniform and learned to keep my face calm, even when everything inside me was on fire. That training didn't leave you. It followed you home. By 6 in the evening, I was back in our kitchen, rinsing rice while my wife, Talia, stirred a pot of greens on the stove. She moved like she knew the space belonged to her, and it did. We'd built this life together. Not fancy, but clean, stable, something Kayla could grow up inside without having to flinch all the time. Talia didn't look at me when my phone started buzzing on the counter. I already knew who it was before I picked it up, her mother. I answered anyway. "Marcus," my mother-in-law said. No hello, no warmth, just my name like a demand. "We need money tonight." I glanced at Talia. She kept stirring, eyes on the pot. Her shoulders tightened, just a little, but she didn't speak. "How much?" I asked. 2,000. Now. Your father-in-law has a situation." I didn't ask what kind of situation. I'd asked before. The answers were always slippery. Medical bill, car repair, legal fee. Somebody needed help. Somebody was always in trouble. "That's a lot," I said, keeping my voice even. "Don't start," she snapped. "You're the husband. You take care of family. That's what a man does." I felt that old pressure in my chest, the one that came from being raised to think love meant carrying people, no matter how heavy they got. Talia finally turned, spoon still in her hand. Her eyes flicked to me and then away. No protest, no explanation, just silence. So I opened my banking app and sent the transfer. "Done," I said. Her mother exhaled like she'd been waiting to breathe. "Good. I knew you'd do the right thing." The line went dead. I stood there for a second, phone still against my ear, listening to nothing. Then I set it down and went back to washing rice, like I hadn't just been emptied out again. Dinner was quiet. Kayla talked about practice. I nodded. Talia smiled at the right moments. She even laughed once, but it didn't reach her eyes. After Kayla went upstairs, Talia wiped her hands on a dish towel and placed a folder on the table in front of me like it was a plate. "I need you to sign this," she said. I didn't touch it right away. The folder was thin, cheap cardboard, the kind you got from an office supply store. My name was printed on the top page. "What is it?" I asked. "It's for the bank. It's nothing. They just need it for a process." Her voice stayed light, too light. I opened the folder and started to read, but she reached over and tapped the bottom of the page. "Just sign here. It's time sensitive." The print was small. The language was thick. I caught words like authorization and transfer and collateral, but it didn't settle in my brain the way it should have. "Why didn't you tell me about this earlier?" I asked. Talia's jaw tightened. "Because you'll overthink it, and we don't have time for that." My phone buzzed again. A text from her mother popped up on the screen. "Men shouldn't ask so many questions." I stared at it for a long beat, the kind that makes your eyes sting but you refuse to blink. Talia watched me like she was waiting for my reaction. Maybe she expected anger. Maybe she expected a fight. But I'd spent too many years learning how to swallow heat. So I signed. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Ink hit paper. A clean line. A simple motion. And something in me shifted, quiet and irreversible. Talia took the folder fast, almost snatched it, then kissed my cheek like that would soften what just happened. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't respond. I followed her with my eyes as she walked to the counter, slipped the folder into her bag, and checked her phone. "I've got to go out for a bit," she said, already reaching for her keys. "Where?" I asked. "Just something I need to handle." Kayla's door creaked upstairs. Talia froze for a second, then forced her voice to stay normal. "Tell Kayla I'll be back soon." The front door opened. The night air rushed in. Then her car started, and the sound of it moved down the street until it disappeared. I stepped onto the porch without thinking. The wood was cool under my bare feet. I stood there with my hands in my pockets, staring at the empty driveway. For years I'd told myself silence was how you keep peace, how you keep a family together, how you protect a child from chaos. But standing there, watching the dark swallow my wife's taillights, it hit me that silence didn't always mean strength. Sometimes it meant you were slowly signing yourself out of your own life, and you didn't even notice it happening. Kayla was already downstairs when I came into the kitchen the next morning. She had her school polo on and one sock halfway up her calf. She poured cereal with the kind of confidence kids have when they don't know what adults are hiding. Talia's side of the bed had been empty when I woke up. I hadn't texted her. I didn't want to start my day chasing answers that would slip away again. Coffee brewed. I opened my banking app the same way I always did, out of habit, not fear. A withdrawal sat there like a bruise. $8,400, gone from our joint account. My thumb hovered over the screen. I clicked into the details. Transfer completed at 1:17 a.m. No memo, no warning. Just a neat, silent exit. Kayla glanced up. "You okay, Dad?" I cleared my throat. "Yeah, just checking something for work." That was a lie, but it was the kind that kept a child from carrying weight that wasn't hers. I got her lunchbox, handed it over, and drove her to school with both hands on the wheel, jaw locked the whole way. She talked about a math quiz. I answered at the right times, nodded, smiled once. That's what a father does when his world is shifting, and his kids still need solid ground. After drop-off, I pulled into a gas station parking lot and called Talia. She answered on the third ring. "Hey," she said, breathy like she'd been running. "Where are you?" I asked. A pause. "I'm handling something." "You took $8,400 out of the account." Silence again. The kind that isn't empty. The kind that's full of decisions already made. "I had to," she finally said. "For what?" "It's something that needed to be done. Please don't do this right now, Marcus." I kept my voice level because if I raised it, I knew I wouldn't stop. "What are you doing behind my back?" I heard her inhale, like she was choosing her words the way people choose exits. "I'm not doing anything to you," she said, but she didn't sound sure. "Then explain it." Another long stretch. No cars passed, no birds, just my own pulse in my ears. "I can't," she whispered. That word hit harder than any accusation. Not won't. Can't. "When will you be home?" I asked. "Later." The call ended before I could say anything else. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dead line. My reflection stared back at me in the dark glass of the driver's side window. A man in his 40s, shoulders squared, face controlled, eyes tired. Nobody teaches you what to do when the person you protect starts keeping you in the dark. Work was worse than usual. 2 drivers didn't show. A shipment got rerouted. One of the guys on the floor snapped at a supervisor and walked out. I handled it all like I always did. Calm voice, quick decisions, no drama. But my mind kept circling that number. 8,400. That wasn't handling something. That was a plan. At lunch, I went to my phone and scrolled through our messages. Nothing from Talia besides a quick busy sent at 2:03 a.m. I looked at the paper I'd signed the night before, tried to remember the wording, the pages I hadn't read. The more I tried, the more it blurred. I left work early for church because Wednesdays were volunteer nights. I usually helped set up chairs, cleaned up afterward, did the quiet work that kept things running. It was supposed to be peaceful, familiar faces, the kind of place where people smiled and called you brother. I walked into the fellowship hall and hadn't even set down the box of cups when Deacon Harris clapped my shoulder. "Marcus," he said, voice too cheerful. "How you holding up?" "I'm fine," I answered automatically. His eyes flicked away, then back. "Talia doing all right down there?" I frowned. "Down where?" He laughed like I was the one missing the joke. "Florida. That's what I heard." My mouth went dry. "What are you talking about?" He scratched his chin, suddenly uncomfortable. You know how folks talk. Somebody said she'd been spending time with some rich people. I just assumed you knew." I stared at him for a second, trying to keep my face from changing. Around us, people stacked chairs and chatted. Someone poured coffee. Life kept moving like nothing had just cracked open inside me. "I'm still working," I said, each word careful. "I'm still here, and I don't know what you heard, but it's not coming from me." Deacon Harris raised his hands. "Hey, no offense, just checking on you." I nodded once and walked away before my voice did something I couldn't take back. By the time I left, my chest felt tight, not from grief, from the humiliation of realizing my marriage wasn't just unstable, it was public. I drove straight to Grady Memorial instead of going home. I told myself it was because Kayla had a follow-up appointment coming up, and I wanted to confirm something. Truth was, I needed to talk to someone who didn't know my wife, someone who didn't have a reason to protect her lies. Nina was in the staff parking lot when I pulled up. Scrubs, hair pulled back, a tired look that came from long hours and too many people needing her. She saw me and slowed. "Marcus, everything all right?" I leaned against my car and tried to find the right words, but none of them sounded good out loud. "I think I signed something I shouldn't have," I said finally. Her expression didn't shift into pity, it shifted into focus. What happened? I told her the short version, the money, the paper, the silence, the way my wife couldn't look at me. Nina listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded once, like she'd already expected the shape of it. "If you don't know what you signed," she said, voice steady, "then you're not being led by love. You're being led by paperwork." I swallowed. "I don't even know where to start." She stepped closer, lowered her voice. "You start by stopping the bleeding. You get copies of everything. You don't sign another page. You don't argue on emotion. You protect your name and your kid. That's it." I didn't answer right away. My hands stayed in my pockets because if I pulled them out, she'd see them shaking. When I got back in my car, I didn't drive home immediately. I sat there, phone in my lap, staring at the screen where Talia's last message still sat. Busy. My thumb moved over the keyboard, then paused. And instead of typing her name, I opened my email and searched for anything with the word bank. The first thing that came up in my inbox was a scanned PDF from a week ago. It had my name in bold, a bank logo at the top, and a subject line that made my stomach tighten. Authorization request. Urgent. I opened it. The same kind of language I'd seen on the pages I signed at the table. Only this copy was worse, because it had something my folder didn't. Page numbers. 1 of 7. 2 of 7. I stared at my own printed signature on page 2, then clicked forward. Page 3 was missing. So was page 4. The file jumped straight to page 5, like somebody had taken a knife to the middle of my life and expected me not to notice. I drove home and dug through the kitchen drawer where we kept paperwork, insurance cards, Kayla's report cards, receipts we never filed right. The folder Talia had given me was gone. So were the loose pages I'd been too tired to question. I stood there holding an empty space, feeling stupid in a way I hadn't felt since I was a kid getting lectured by adults who thought they were always right. Kayla came down the stairs with her hair wrapped in a towel. "Mom home?" "Not yet," I said. She nodded like that was normal now. Then she opened the fridge, pulled out orange juice, and started talking about a girl on her team who kept stealing everyone's water bottles. I listened. I laughed once. I made a mental note to buy another bottle. I let her life stay the same for 10 more minutes because that's what fathers do when everything is changing. After she went back upstairs, I called the bank. The automated system asked for my last 4 digits. I punched them in, then waded through the music and a cheerful recorded voice that kept saying, "Your call is important to us." When a representative finally came on, I kept my tone polite. "I need copies of all documents tied to my recent authorization forms." "Sure," she said. "Can you verify your address?" I verified. She typed, "Okay, Mr. Hill, I see the file. It looks like it was transferred." "Transferred where?" "To a partner office." "Which one?" Her typing paused. "One moment." I waited. I held the phone away from my face and watched my hand, still steady. That's what I'd trained myself to do. Stay calm even when somebody tried to take control of the room. She came back. It was routed to a legal office in Charlotte, North Carolina. My jaw tightened. "Why Charlotte? I live in Atlanta." "It's the office handling the processing," she said carefully, like she was reading from a script. "Who's the representative listed on the file?" Silence. Not dead silence. The kind of silence people make when they don't want to say a name. "Ma'am," I said, still polite, "I need the name." She cleared her throat. "Grant Holloway." I repeated it out loud. "Grant Holloway." "Yes, sir." I'd never heard that name in my life. I ended the call and sat at the kitchen table staring at my phone like it had betrayed me. My mind started doing what it always did when I couldn't control something, finding patterns, running through options, looking for the most logical explanation. Talia had mentioned a bank process. She'd said it was nothing. Her mother had texted me about men asking too many questions. 8,400 vanished from our account at 1:17 a.m. Now there was Charlotte. Now there was Grant Holloway. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, that maybe this was normal, that maybe my wife had just gotten in over her head and didn't know how to explain it. But the part of me that had been trained to spot trouble, that part didn't buy it. It wasn't jealousy I felt. It was something uglier. Being used. I didn't tell anyone at work. Didn't tell the guys at church. I didn't even tell my sister. Shame has a way of making you quiet. It convinces you the problem is you. That night, after Kayla went to bed, I called Nina. She picked up on the first ring. "You found something," she said, not a question. "Pages are missing," I told her. "And the bank says the file got transferred to Charlotte. There's a name tied to it." "Whose name?" "Grant Holloway." Nina didn't gasp. She didn't do drama. She just let the name sit in the air for a second. "Okay," she said. "Then you treat this like a situation, not a marriage problem." "What does that mean?" "It means you document everything. Screenshots, dates, amounts, every message. Don't confront her in anger, and don't sign anything else, you hear me?" I did. "Start small," she continued. "Track what you can legally track. Protect your accounts, make copies." I opened my laptop while she spoke and started saving files into a folder. Bank statements, emails, text threads. I didn't enjoy it. It felt like I was building a case against my own home. But something in my gut told me I was late already. The next day, I stopped by an electronics store on my way back from work and bought a GPS tracker. The car was in my name. Both cars, technically. The payments came out of my paycheck. I wasn't putting it on her to spy like some jealous boyfriend. I was putting it on because I needed facts. I installed it under the bumper with a small wrench and steady hands, like I was doing maintenance. When Talia came home, she acted normal. She kissed Kayla, asked about school, heated up leftovers like nothing was wrong. She even asked me how work was. I answered the same way I always did. Busy. She nodded and went upstairs to shower. At 10:46 p.m., her phone chimed. She glanced at it, then tucked it face down. At 11:12, she said she had to check on her mom. At 11:19, she walked out the door. I watched from the living room as her taillights disappeared down the street again. Then I opened the tracking app. Her car headed toward the highway. I waited 5 minutes, grabbed my keys, and drove after her. I kept 2 car lengths back. 3. I didn't race. I didn't weave through traffic. I drove like I was going to the grocery store. Her route led out of Atlanta, into quieter stretches of road, then into an area I didn't recognize until I saw the buildings. Office parks. Empty lots. A place where nobody went at midnight unless they had a reason. She pulled into a parking lot beside a low glass building. No sign out front that I could read from where I sat. I parked across the street and waited. Talia stepped out in her work clothes. She walked inside without looking around. 30 minutes passed, then 40. I kept my hands on the steering wheel and forced myself not to imagine things I couldn't prove. When she came back out, she wasn't wearing the blouse she'd left in. She had on a fitted black dress, heels, hair down like she was about to meet somebody who mattered. She got into her car and drove off, and I followed far enough to keep the signal, but not close enough to be seen. My eyes staying on the road, while my mind kept repeating the same question I couldn't say out loud. Who was she becoming? And why was I the last person to know? The letter showed up 2 days later, mixed in with grocery store coupons and a flyer from Kayla's school. A plain white envelope, no return address I recognized. The kind of thing most people tear open without thinking. I did think. I stood at the kitchen counter, fingers pinching the edge, like the paper might bite. Inside was a clean packet with a law firm letterhead from Charlotte, North Carolina. The words were polite, professional, cold. Notice of asset authorization agreement. My eyes dropped to the bottom. There it was, my signature. Not forged, not copied, mine. The exact slant of my M, the heavy line where my pen always pressed too hard. A strange calm rolled over me, the kind that comes when you finally see the shape of the trap. They didn't steal my name. They got me to hand it over. I sat down at the table and read every line, slower than I'd ever read anything in my life. It talked about authorizing a third-party representative to act on my behalf, to negotiate, to restructure, to secure temporary liquidity. Temporary. Like they planned to give it back. Grant Holloway was listed in the margins as the assigned agent. It wasn't the mansion yet. It wasn't Florida. It was worse. It was paper. A clean, legal way to turn me into a man who couldn't even claim his own money without permission. My phone buzzed while I was still reading. A call from Kayla's school. I answered fast. Mr. Hill, this is Ms. Reynolds. Kayla seems upset. She wants to go home. What happened? I asked. She got a call during lunch, the teacher said carefully. It wasn't from you. My stomach tightened. I'm on my way. I drove like the roads were empty, even though they weren't. When I pulled up, Kayla was sitting in the front office with her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her insides together. She stood when she saw me. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. That made it worse. Who called you? I asked, keeping my voice low. She hesitated. Grandma. Her grandmother. Talia's mother. I waited. Kayla swallowed. She said, Mom and me deserve better. She said you don't take care of us. She said you act like you're doing everything, but you're not. The words landed like a shove. I could have snapped, could have said 100 things. Instead, I walked up and pulled my daughter into my chest. She held on like she'd been waiting for permission. Look at me, I said. Kayla tilted her face up. You don't have to carry what grown folks say, I told her. You hear me? She nodded, but her eyes still asked the question her mouth couldn't. All you need to know is this, I continued. Your dad does right by you, always, and you don't have to argue with anybody about that. Kayla blinked hard. Okay. I signed her out, thanked the staff, and drove her home. She stayed quiet the whole ride. Her hands twisted the strap of her backpack until her knuckles turned pale. At home, she went upstairs without even asking for a snack. That silence felt heavier than any shouting match. Talia came in an hour later, walking into the kitchen like she was stepping around a mess she didn't want to clean. I held the packet up. This came today, I said. Her eyes flicked over it, then dropped. Marcus, don't, I cut in. Not loud, just firm. Don't do the voice. Talia set her purse down carefully, like everything she did had to look calm. It's not what you think, she said. It's exactly what I think, I replied. It's my name, my signature. Somebody in Charlotte has permission to move my money like I don't exist. She stared at the floor. Her hands gripped the edge of the counter. You're going to make this worse, she said, barely above a whisper. I leaned in slightly. Worse than what? She finally looked at me, and there was fear there, real fear. Don't make a scene, she said. If you push back, they could come after your job. That sentence hit harder than the money, harder than the paperwork, because it told me the truth. This wasn't just family drama. This was leverage. My work badge, my reputation, my ability to provide, my place as Kayla's father. Everything I'd built with discipline and sweat was being used like a bargaining chip. I didn't answer. I didn't give her a reaction she could report back. Instead, I walked past her, grabbed my keys, and stepped out the front door. The car smelled like old coffee and gym bags. I sat behind the wheel and didn't start the engine right away. My hands stayed still in my lap, while my mind ran through one question, over and over. Where does a man go when the people closest to him decide he's disposable? My phone buzzed while I was still sitting in the driveway, hands resting on the steering wheel like they belonged to someone else. Unknown number, no name, no emoji, no explanation, just a photo. At first I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then my eyes adjusted, and the air left my lungs in one slow pull. Talia stood inside a mansion. Marble floors, tall ceilings, a hallway so wide it looked like it was built for people who never carried groceries. Behind her, on the wall, was a framed portrait of her face. Not a casual picture, a posed one. The kind people hang when they want the world to know who matters in the house. Below the image was a single text line. "You're not the only one being used." I stared at it until my vision blurred. It wasn't jealousy that rose up. It was something colder, a quiet realization that I wasn't dealing with a mistake. I was dealing with a system. I didn't go back inside. I didn't confront Talia. I didn't call her mother and give her the satisfaction of hearing my voice shake. Instead, I called Nina. "I need a lawyer," I said. "Charlotte," she replied immediately. "You go to Charlotte. Not tomorrow. Now." By dawn, I'd called in sick, packed a small bag, and arranged for Kayla to stay with my sister for the weekend. I told Kayla I had a work emergency. She didn't argue. She just hugged me longer than usual. The drive to Charlotte felt like it took a year. I kept my face forward, but my thoughts stayed locked on that photo, that frame, that mansion. The law office was quiet and clean, the kind of place where people spoke in measured tones and nothing smelled like home. The attorney's name was Daniel Price, mid-50s, gray hair. No smile until he had the facts. He read the documents I brought, scanned the bank notice, and asked a few sharp questions. Then he leaned back and looked me straight in the face. "Mr. Hill, you signed an authorization that allows a third party to negotiate assets and attach your name to debt," he said. "If they used deception, withheld pages, or pressured you into signing without disclosure, it could qualify as fraud." Hearing it out loud made my stomach twist, but it also gave the situation a shape I could handle. Fraud, evidence, process. Not feelings, not begging. As I left his office, my email pinged. A message from an address I didn't recognize. No greeting, just a sentence. "Stop digging, you'll regret it." Another one came 10 minutes later. "Your daughter's school is easy to find." My hands stayed steady, but my mouth went dry. I didn't reply. I forwarded both emails to Daniel Price and saved screenshots to my folder. An hour after that, Talia's mother called. I let it ring out. She called again, then again. When I finally answered, her voice came through in a rush of tears. "Marcus, what are you doing? You're tearing this family apart." I looked down at the time on my dashboard clock. Late afternoon, my head already pounding. "I'm handling something," I said. "You're being selfish." I ended the call. No argument, no defense, no explanation. I put the phone face down on the passenger seat and started the car again, knowing for the first time that talking was only feeding them. From now on, they wouldn't get my voice. They'd get my paperwork. The first thing I did when I got back to Atlanta was open a new folder on my laptop and name it exactly what it was. Hill. Documents. No drama, no poetry, just facts. I downloaded every bank statement from the last 12 months. I printed the law notice from Charlotte. I took screenshots of the transfers, then saved them in two places, laptop and an encrypted drive I kept in my work bag. Every text from Talia's mother went into a separate file. Same with every email that carried a threat disguised as advice. I wasn't trying to win an argument anymore. I was building a record. When Talia called, I let it go to voicemail. When she texted, I responded with one line. "We'll discuss this through counsel." My own words surprised me the first time I typed them. They sounded like someone who wasn't begging, someone who hadn't been trained to keep the peace at his own expense. I met Daniel Price again on Zoom that week. He talked through the process like he was explaining weather. "You're going to need a timeline," he said. "Dates, times, patterns. And you're going to need proof of deception. Missing pages, pressure, any coercion." So I made a timeline. Talia left at 11:19 p.m. on Tuesday, returned at 2:06 a.m., withdrawal at 1:17 a.m. Each entry was short, precise, no feelings attached. Nina checked on me every couple of days. She didn't ask how I felt. She asked what I'd done. Eat something, she'd say. Yeah. Sleep? A little. Good. Keep your head. That was her version of support. She treated me like a man who still had work to do, not a man who needed pity. 2 weeks later, I used vacation time and flew to Florida. Palm Beach wasn't my world. I didn't go there to start a scene. I didn't go there to catch anyone in bed. I went to see the truth with my own eyes. The address from the anonymous text led me to a neighborhood that looked like it didn't know what debt was. Security at the gate. Cars that cost more than my first house. People walking small dogs like they were jewelry. I parked across the street, far enough to blend in, close enough to watch. The mansion sat back from the road. Clean lines. Quiet confidence. The kind of place that didn't need to show off because the world already bowed to it. Lights came on inside after a while. Through the wide front windows, I saw movement. A shadow crossing the foyer. Then I saw it. A framed portrait on the wall, lit from above like it was part of the building itself. Talia's face. My hands didn't clench. My stomach didn't flip the way it would have weeks ago. Something inside me had already cooled. Pain had burned through its own fuel. I was standing there like a stranger watching another man's life. On the drive back to my hotel, a black SUV stayed behind me through 3 turns. Not close enough to be obvious, but close enough to be deliberate. I switched lanes. It switched too. I took an exit, looped through a gas station, then merged back onto the highway. It stayed. My phone buzzed with a security alert. New login detected. The location wasn't Georgia. It wasn't Florida either. I changed every password right there in the parking lot. Hands steady, breath slow. Swapped my SIM card the next morning. Called my carrier and locked my account with a PIN only Nina knew. Then a text came through from an unknown number. Stop digging. 2 words. No punctuation. No heat. Just certainty. I stared at it for a moment, then deleted it and took a screenshot first. Back in my hotel room, I opened my folder, added the screenshot, and kept working, quietly, methodically, like I was preparing for something bigger than a marriage falling apart. HR didn't call me by phone. They emailed me, formal and polite, like they were inviting me to a training session. Please come to conference room B at 9 a.m. regarding an internal matter. I walked in on time. Clean shirt, work badge, notebook in my hand like it was a normal meeting. 2 people sat at the table, one from HR, one from compliance. Both had that careful face people wear when they don't want to be accused of anything. Marcus, the HR woman said, thank you for coming. She slid a paper across the table. Anonymous complaint, allegation of theft, misuse of company resources, proper handling of vendor funds. I didn't react. I didn't ask who made the complaint. I didn't argue. Instead, I read it once, then set it down. I didn't do any of this, I said. The compliance guy leaned forward. We're required to investigate, he replied. Of course you are, I said, so let's make it easy. I opened my notebook and started listing what they'd need. Access logs, vendor invoices, my approvals, camera footage, my emails, everything. I offered it without hesitation because I knew the truth had one advantage. It stayed consistent. They took notes. They asked questions. I answered in full sentences, no emotion. Same tone I used when I trained new supervisors on safety protocol. Still, I saw it. The flicker. That small shift in their eyes when they looked at me like they weren't sure anymore. That's what cut deepest. Not the accusation, the doubt. When I walked out, a few guys on the floor glanced up and went quiet. Maybe they didn't know why. Maybe they just sensed something. Either way, my name didn't feel like mine for the rest of the day. I got home around 6. Kayla was doing homework at the table, pencil tapping the page the way she did when she got stuck. She smiled when I came in, then went back to her work. A knock hit the front door. Not loud, not aggressive, just official. I opened it and a man in a plain suit handed me an envelope. Marcus Hill? He asked. Yes. You've been served. He walked away before I could say anything else, like my life was just another stop on his route. I looked down at the envelope. Court seal. My wife's name printed cleanly on the top line. Temporary custody request. Allegations. Instability, controlling behavior, emotional intimidation. I stared at the words until they stopped looking like English. Kayla's chair scraped behind me. "Dad?" she said softly. "What is it?" I didn't answer right away. My throat felt tight, but my face stayed still. That old training kicked in. The part of me that knew kids feel panic before they understand it. I crouched down beside her and put my hand on her shoulder. "Come with me," I said. She followed me into the living room. I locked the front door, then drew the curtains. Not because I thought someone was watching, but because I needed the world outside to stop touching us for 1 minute. Kayla sat on the couch, knees pulled up. "Am I in trouble?" she asked. "No," I said, "you're not." "Is Mom mad at you?" I looked at my daughter's face, and something in me cracked. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet break where trust used to sit. "Your mom and I are dealing with grown-up things," I told her. "But you're safe, I promise." Kayla nodded, but her eyes stayed on the envelope in my hand like it was a weapon. After she went upstairs, I stood in the kitchen and read the papers again. Every sentence felt like it had been written to erase me, to turn me into a dangerous man in a room where I'd never even raised my voice. I didn't slam anything. I didn't punch a wall. I didn't call Talia and beg her to stop. I called Nina. She answered immediately. "They served you," she said, like she'd already guessed. "Yeah," I replied, "and they went after my job too." "Okay," Nina said. "Breathe, then call your lawyer, tonight." I dialed Daniel Price next. He picked up after 2 rings, voice sharp but steady. "Email me the petition," he said, "and don't speak to anyone about this except me." I stood there with my laptop open, scanner running, sending documents into the folder I'd started like it was my only shield. Upstairs, Kayla's shower turned on. Water ran through the pipes. And in the middle of that normal sound, I realized the truth. If I kept swallowing this for the sake of peace, I wouldn't just lose my marriage. I'd lose my daughter. I'd lose my name. And I'd lose the right to tell my own story. The next morning, Kayla ate her breakfast without looking at me. She wasn't angry. She was scared, and fear makes kids quiet. I packed her lunch, signed a permission slip, and drove her to school like it was any other day. I didn't mention the papers. I didn't mention her mother. I just told her I'd pick her up on time. "Promise?" she asked before she shut the door. "Promise," I said. When I got back to the car, I sat there for a second and stared at my hands on the steering wheel. The fear in my daughter's voice settled something in me. By noon, Daniel Price had filed an emergency response to the custody petition. He also sent me one sentence that stayed in my head the rest of the day. "Let facts do the talking." I didn't argue with Talia. I didn't call her mother. I didn't waste breath on rage. I booked a flight to Florida and sent Talia a message from an email account she didn't know existed. "Meet me tomorrow, 6:30 p.m., Oceanfront Park. No lawyers, no family," she replied an hour later. Okay. Oceanfront Park was a public place. No gates, no guards, no marble floors. Just benches, joggers, and people walking their dogs like they had normal problems. Talia arrived wearing jeans and a hoodie, no makeup, hair pulled back. She looked smaller than I remembered, like she'd been carrying something heavy for too long. Her eyes were red, but she didn't let the tears fall. She stopped a few feet away. "Marcus," she said. I didn't step forward. I didn't hug her. I didn't give her the comfort she'd grown used to pulling from me when things got tense. "Talk," I said. Talia swallowed hard. "Grant Holloway." Her voice cracked on the name. She steadied it. "He's been using me." I waited. "He needed a face," she continued. "Someone who looks clean. Someone the bank would trust. My parents, they took money from him. They told me it was the only way to fix things. They kept saying you'd handle it, because you always do." My stomach tightened, but my face stayed still. "And me?" I asked. She looked down. "You're the clean name, the steady job, the husband who signs without asking too much." That's what they said. The words were ugly, but I appreciated one thing. She finally said them plain. I nodded once. "Do you want out?" I asked. "Or do you want to drag me down with you?" Talia didn't answer right away. She stared at the ground like she was searching for a way to survive without choosing a side. When she lifted her eyes, I saw it. Fear. Not guilt. Not romance. Fear. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small USB drive. Her hand shook, just enough to notice. "I kept everything," she said quietly. Emails, contracts, voice notes. He threatened me. He threatened you. He said if I didn't cooperate, he'd ruin you and take Kayla from me. I took the USB but didn't touch her fingers. That part of us felt gone already. Why now? I asked. Her mouth opened, closed again. Because you stopped talking, she admitted. And when you stopped, I realized I couldn't control you anymore. And neither could they. I slipped the USB into my pocket like it was a weapon I didn't plan to swing wildly. Talia wiped her face with the back of her sleeve. They have lawyers, she whispered. They have money. You don't understand. I understand, I said, cutting her off. They have power on the surface. I looked past her, then back. But paper has a pattern. Money leaves footprints. And threats are evidence. Talia stared at me like she hadn't seen this version of me before. I didn't wait for her to say anything else. I turned and walked toward my rental car, already pulling my phone out to call Daniel Price, already thinking about what to send first. Daniel Price flew in from Charlotte. I flew in from Atlanta with a folder that never left my hand. By the time we met outside the building in Washington, D.C., and I'd already eaten half a granola bar and tasted none of it. The lobby was full of people who looked like they belonged there. Suits, briefcases, calm faces. I didn't dress to impress. I dressed to be taken seriously. Clean slacks, button-down shirt, no jewelry, no noise. Daniel nodded once. Stay quiet, he said. Let them speak. You'll answer if asked. We went through security and into a conference room with a long table. 2 investigators sat on one side. Another attorney sat near them. Papers were stacked neatly in front of everybody like this was just another day at the office. I placed my folder down and kept my hands in my lap. The door opened. Grant Holloway walked in like he owned the building. Mid-50s, crisp suit, watch that probably cost more than my car. He didn't glance around to find a seat. He scanned the room like he was checking inventory. When his eyes landed on me, they didn't widen. They didn't harden either. He looked prepared, like he'd expected me to show up eventually. Grant took the chair across from me without asking. His lawyer leaned in and whispered something. Grant didn't respond. One of the investigators began outlining the allegations: possible financial fraud, misuse of borrower identities, coercion, threats. The words sounded clinical, but I heard the truth under them. They'd been running a machine. Grant smiled at some point, small and controlled, as if he couldn't help it. Then he slid a thin packet across the table toward Daniel. We can resolve this quietly, he said. No one needs to get hurt. Daniel didn't touch the packet. Grant's gaze stayed on me. You have a daughter, he continued, voice still smooth. Kids get nervous when their parents make things public. Schools are unpredictable places. My heartbeat stayed steady. That was the strange part. It wasn't courage, it was clarity. I looked him in the face. Are you threatening my child? I asked. Grant's smile didn't move. I'm offering you peace, he replied. Take it. Daniel finally spoke. Mr. Holloway, you should choose your next words carefully. Grant leaned back, relaxed, like consequences didn't apply to him. I reached into my folder and pulled out the first stack. I didn't slam it down. I didn't make a scene. I placed it on the table the way you lay down a final card. These are bank statements, I said. Every transfer tied to my joint account, and every transaction that happened after I signed incomplete paperwork. I slid over the next set. These are emails and contracts from the USB drive. Your name appears on all of them. Another set. This is a recording of your voice threatening my wife. And this is an email from your office saying my daughter's school is easy to find. I watched the investigator's pen pause. Grant's posture shifted, just slightly. His shoulders tightened in a way his suit couldn't hide. Daniel added the final file to the table. And these, he said, are the documents showing missing pages and inconsistent signatures, along with evidence that Mr. Hill's identity was used as a straw borrower. For the first time, Grant's face changed. His mouth opened like he was about to speak, then stopped. The smooth confidence cracked at the edges. The investigator asked a question directly to Grant. His answer came out sharper than before, less controlled. The room changed with that tone. People stopped treating him like a businessman and started treating him like a suspect. I didn't sit there to enjoy it. I didn't need to. When the investigator asked for a break, Daniel leaned toward me. "You did what you needed to do," he said. I nodded once, stood up, and left the folder on the table. Grant watched me walk out. He didn't smile anymore. Outside, the air felt ordinary. Cars passed. People crossed the street holding coffee cups. A normal day for everybody else. I pulled my phone out and typed one message to Nina. It's in their hands now. Then I put the phone back in my pocket and kept walking, already thinking about the next thing I had to do when I got back home. Kayla and I moved out on a Tuesday, not after a big fight, not after a dramatic goodbye, just a Tuesday, like any other day life keeps rolling through. I rented a 2-bedroom apartment 10 minutes from her school. It wasn't fancy. It didn't need to be. It had clean carpet, working locks, and a second room that belonged to my daughter without question. The first night there, Kayla walked around like she was testing the air. "This is really ours?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, handing her a box marked books. "Put your stuff where you want." She nodded and carried the box into her room with both arms wrapped around it like she was holding something precious. I kept going to work. I didn't miss a day. The investigation at the warehouse cleared me. HR sent a short email saying the complaint was unsubstantiated. No apology, no explanation. But my name stayed clean, and that was enough. Daniel Price called me every few days with updates. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He spoke in timelines and facts, the way men do when feelings are too expensive. Grant Holloway got indicted. Federal charges, financial fraud, coercion, witness intimidation. The Florida transactions were pulled apart one by one. Banks started freezing accounts. People who used to stand near him suddenly stopped answering calls. The man who had walked into rooms like he owned them ended up sitting in one where he couldn't control the door. My mother-in-law didn't go to jail. Life doesn't always give you that kind of clean ending, but she did get served. Civil suits, repayment orders, her name attached to documents she couldn't cry her way out of. The help she used to demand turned into debt she had to face. Talia tried calling twice. Then she sent one email. "Can we talk?" Just once. I read it, stared at it for a moment, then forwarded it to Daniel without replying. The custody case dragged for weeks. Mediation sessions, temporary orders, court dates that started early and ended late. I didn't beg. I didn't plead. I showed up. I brought evidence. I spoke when I needed to and stayed quiet when I didn't. In the end, the judge granted me primary custody. Talia got supervised visitation at first, then structured weekends after she cooperated with investigators. No harsh words from me, no revenge speeches, just boundaries written in ink. That last afternoon, after the final hearing, Kayla climbed into the passenger seat and buckled herself without being told. Her shoulders looked lighter than they had in months. We drove back to the apartment in steady traffic. No music on, no talking, just the road and the quiet. At home, she kicked her sneakers off by the door and sat at the kitchen table with her homework folder. I washed my hands at the sink, letting the water run longer than necessary. Soap, rinse, repeat. A small routine that reminded me I still had control over something. Kayla's pencil scratched against paper. The faucet kept running. And in that plain, ordinary sound, there was a kind of peace that didn't need anyone's permission.